from the Gospel of Luke and the Epistle of Hebrews. Hear what God's Spirit is saying to you. He said also to the one who had invited him, "When you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends or brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you. For you will be repaid at the resurrection of righteousness. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that some have entertained angels without knowing it." Here ends the reading of words that give us insight on God. May God grant us with wisdom and courage for interpretation.
My name is Marshela Salgado-Solorio. Many of you know me as the youth and family director here at the church and minister. And many of you have gotten to know me over the past year if you've been able to tune in virtually. I lead the worship and wonder time with the children, and over the past year with all of you. And as you know, we begin that time together by singing a song, "Be Still and Know." So I thought it would be appropriate and nice for us to begin our time together here by singing that song. So if you don't know it, that's okay. You can learn it. It's a very easy song. And just let's take a moment to center ourselves. And you can close your eyes or keep your eyes open, whatever is most comfortable. But let's sing together. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. I don't know about you, but that felt really good to sing it together out loud. It's been a long time since I've had other voices sing with me. Thank you. As I was mentioning, I am the minister that works with youth and families here at UCC. And let me tell you that this past year has been incredibly difficult, trying to do children and youth ministries virtually. But I have kept trying to find ways to keep families and youth engaged. And one of the ways that the youth and I have tried to be involved is by volunteering at Vista La Mesa Christian Church at their second Saturdays. And second Saturdays are when the church feeds those who need food. They also allow them to go and shower, and they provide clothing and essentials. And so far, it's just been Gabe and I, who you just read scripture, who have gone to volunteer there with our partner church. But it is what we do every second Saturday, and it's a really special time. These second Saturdays are intentionally made by that church to be hospitable spaces, to feed those who are hungry without agenda, without asking for anything in return from them. And especially during non-COVID times, it's a really radical display of hospitality as the volunteers are able to sit down with the people who come to be fed and share in conversations with them. It allows for people who are oftentimes ignored or treated badly or inhumanely to feel human again, sharing in food and conversation together, having a shower, and again, without any ulterior motive. Much of my life, my heart has actually tugged towards ministries like that do just that. Clothe, feed, and care for the most vulnerable in radical ways without desire or need to ask anything of them. And during my college years, I learned about Dorothy Day, who lived this radical lifestyle and who, along with Peter Morin, started the Catholic worker movement. Her life fascinates me. And for those of you who don't know who she is, Dorothy Day was a journalist who was always immensely bothered by the inequalities that she saw around her. She joined the Socialist Party in the 1920s, and she wrote for socialist newspapers, believing that she could make a difference there. But what she soon learned was that she could write about what she saw, and her friends and colleagues could talk about all the inequalities and how to make the world a better place, but that was about it. It was a lot of talk and very little action, and she wanted more. You can actually watch Dorothy Day's story in a movie called Entertaining Angels. And in this movie, we learn more about her life. It shows that after riding in New York City for some time, she moves to the ocean and eventually meets a nun who was working with the most vulnerable in Staten Island. And Dorothy was really curious about the nun and these communal meals that she would share with the most vulnerable. And everyone contributed what they could to this meal, and then they would share in this meal together. But even though she was curious, Dorothy wanted nothing to do with religion, stating to the nun, "I heard what Jesus said, and I say that's great. I see what the church does, and I say no thanks. Where is Jesus in your church?" And the nun replies, "Right smack in the middle of it. In the people, the working class, the immigrants, the poor, God with a human face grabbing a hold of us." Dorothy's faith begins to grow, and she eventually converts to Catholicism. And upon returning to New York City, she's still plagued by the injustices that she sees around her. Enter Peter Morin, a super quirky Catholic who had developed a program of social reconstruction based on communal farming and the establishment of houses of hospitality for the urban poor. And this program actually aimed to unite workers as well as intellectuals in joint activities, ranging from farming to education discussions. And he urged Dorothy to join him in this effort, and they founded the Catholic Worker, a newspaper that spread radical ideas about God's love and justice and inclusion. And in only 3 years, the paper's circulation grew to over 150,000. They also started a house, St. Joseph's House of Hospitality, which originated in Dorothy's brother's tiny apartment. There, they treated people without homes, prostitutes, drug addicts, runaways, immigrants, abused people who had nowhere to go, everyone and anyone who needed help. Sometimes barely being able to pay rent themselves, they kept taking people in, feeding them and caring for them, asking nothing in return but their very presence. This house served as a pattern for other houses, and now in 2021, they have over 250 houses of hospitality across the world. Dorothy Day was called a radical by her church and by people in the community. She firmly held on to the Catholic Church's idea of preferential option for the poor, which refers to a trend in the Bible of preference being given to the well-being of the poor and powerless of society in the teaching and commands of God as well as the prophets. And we clearly see that in Jesus' teachings. The passage from Luke that Gabe just read states that the host, when holding a banquet, should invite people who are poor, have disabilities, who are limping, and who are blind. That sounds like a rager of a party, doesn't it? But Luke obviously didn't pull this idea out of nowhere. He based it on the teachings of Jesus and on scriptures from the Old Testament, such as Proverbs 22:9. One who is generous will be blessed because he gives some of his food to the poor. And Luke points straight back to the host of our communal table, to Jesus, where in Matthew 15:30 it states, "And large crowds came to him, bringing with them those who were limping, had impaired limbs, were blind, or were unable to speak, and many others. And they laid them down at his feet, and he healed them." Again, this kind of party really doesn't sound like a rager, does it? The dirty, the downtrodden, but it's where we are asked to, time and time again throughout Scripture, to throw our party, to be gracious hosts. And you know, sometimes we blow off this radical call pretty easy by claiming that we're welcoming to people at church. We welcome people to our space. We give houseless neighbors the granola bar that we have in our car or a gentle smile. We donate our old clothes to those in need. And we move on with our day feeling good about ourselves because we gave. And honestly, thank goodness we do those things because they do make a difference. They do help feed empty bellies or clothe the naked. But you know, and this statement that I'm about to make convicts me every day, hospitality goes beyond handing out food and smiles and donations. I think most of us gathered here at our core know that our scriptures call us time and time again to dig deeper into relationship with the poor, with those who are unloved, with those who are on the margins of society. And we see this again in Scripture over and over again. Isaiah 58:7, is it not to break your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into the house? When you see the naked, to cover them. Romans 12:13, share with the saints who are in need. Practice hospitality. Matthew 25:35, for I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. We know the scriptures, and these are just a few. Yet why is it so hard for us to practice hospitality? Could it be because the very people we're asked to love and commune with are oftentimes dirty? They're suffering from mental health issues that don't allow us to even have a conversation with them. They speak in another language and have different cultures. They mess up over and over again, falling off that sobriety train. They're unshowered. The list could go on and on. We know it's not easy. I think of someone like Jenny, who many of you remember. She walked up and down the streets of Hillcrest, of Mission Hills, of Old Town, screaming at the top of her lungs. And when she was on medication, we know she was better, but she was still so intimidating. And let's face it, she was so dirty. But a member of our congregation taught me that when you said Jenny's name, she would automatically snap out of whatever other world she was in, and you could have a conversation with her. So I started doing that, and eventually I was able to hold conversations with Jenny. And one of the last conversations I had with her was in February of 2020. I was rushing out of the church to pick up my children, like I often do, very late, and I stumbled upon Jenny. I could have just rushed past her, but I didn't, and I stopped to chat with her, and I'm really glad that I did. She asked me if I worked at the preschool, and I explained that I actually work for the church, and she replied, "Oh, all this time I thought you worked at the preschool." And then she said, "I wish I had a job. I should have tried to get a job while I could, but now there's no way I can. Look at me." And she pointed to her ragged clothes, her wrinkled, broken, and dirty hands, her almost toothless mouth. "People make me feel like I'm not human. They treat me like trash. I don't think they remember that I'm human." And in that moment, what flew out of my mouth wasn't mine and must have truly come from God, because I said, "Jenny, God loves you. God sees you and knows that you are human. You are God's creation, and Jenny, I love you, and I hope you remember that." And the reason that moment is so important to me is that a few months later, as many of you know, in late June, they found Jenny's body across the street. She had died in the middle of the night, sleeping on the sidewalk. Now, I'm no saint. Gary, who introduced me to Jenny, is no saint. Vince, our office manager, who treated Jenny with so much dignity, is no saint. But I know that we seek to meet the broken where they are. Loving the despised is never easy. It's an act that will break you and will require so much patience. In fact, Dorothy Day even wrote about her desire to leave her work and of the loneliness in the work. Is it any wonder that her autobiography was entitled "The Long Loneliness"? There's a clip from the Dorothy Day movie, Entertaining Angels, that I'd like to show really quick. And in this scene, Dorothy's colleagues and her fellow housemates who work alongside her are tired of caring for the poor. They tell her they're done. They're done cleaning feet, sharing food, stopping fights, of doing all this dirty work. And Dorothy breaks. She leaves the house, and her breaking point leads her to a church to have a word with the one who called her to do this work. Let's watch this clip.
yours. The one that you want me to love. Let me tell you something. They smell. They have lice and tuberculosis. Am I to find you in them? Well, you're ugly. You drink, and you wet your pants, and you vomit. How could anyone ever love you?
Am I to find you in them? Well, you're ugly. You drink and you wet your pants and you vomit. How can anyone ever love you? After this scene, Dorothy goes back to the house of hospitality and has an intense run-in with a former friend of hers who is now living in the house of hospitality because she became an addict and a prostitute. Her friend steals what little money Dorothy and them have for rent, and she gets caught. Dorothy is angry. Her housemates have abandoned her, her friend is stealing from her, and they physically begin to fight. The friend begs Dorothy to hit her. Hit me, because she feels she deserves it. And in that moment, Dorothy stops and her face changes and she says, "No, I see the light in you, the courage and the love. You're very beautiful. I love you." And her friend replies, "You can't. I stole from you, the only person who ever cared about me." And other members of the community start joining them in the room, and Dorothy says, "We all love you." Dorothy moves from a place of asking, "How can anyone love you?" to "I love you," to "We all love you." Hospitality in true communion is an act that will require constant work, but it's an act that will always draw you back, because once you truly see Jesus or God's face in the eyes of the broken, you'll never unsee it. You will see the light in them, and once you hear Jesus' words and live them out in action, you will never go back. And if we want true communion with God, then we find it in the places and the spaces that make us the most uncomfortable. In the place where God tells us we will find him, in the poor and in the broken. Dorothy's words echo in my ears. We all love you. It's up to us, the church, together, both here and the church once we disperse beyond the walls into the community, to offer a hospitable place of inclusion and belonging for society's most vulnerable. We are to move beyond Band-Aid programs and small acts to radical action. Radical hospitality is a form of resistance, and we all know that Jesus was about resistance. Radical hospitality aligns us with God's preferential option for the poor. It demands a lot from us, and it transforms us together. Dorothy didn't do the work alone. It took a community of workers to maintain these houses of hospitality. And you know, we're not all called to live in houses of hospitality like Dorothy Day and the Catholic workers. But in the words of Reverend Courtwright Davis, we are called to move beyond outreach and charity that maintains the unjust distribution of power and resources, to be congregations formed in radical hospitality and exercise a commitment in justice. This model seeks to transform both the believer and society as a whole. And here is my commitment to you as a staff person and as a pastor here at University Christian Church. I will seek to continue finding ways for us to move into radical hospitality, to truly make the unlovable feel loved at University Christian Church. Many of you are already doing that work as on a daily basis, as you volunteer at organizations across the county, as you dedicate your lives to this work, and as you walk the streets building relationships with the marginalized. And if we are to do this work as a congregation, then we need to do it together. We each need to do our part. As Dorothy Day stated, I don't think God will judge us on how successful we are in changing the world. I do think he will judge us on how faithful we are in serving the poor. How are you serving the poor? How is University Christian Church serving the poor? Our collaboratives, we need you. Our social justice collaborative, our community breakfast collaborative, our outreach collaborative, we need you. We need you to do the work of Jesus and be active participants in living out a radical hospitality. We need to be a place that says, we all love you and truly mean it. Because in doing so, we just may be entertaining angels without knowing it. May it be so.